little town.
Do you know what Haddonfield is? Families, children, all lined up in rows, up and down these streets. You're telling me they're lined up for a slaughterhouse?
They could be.
For over 40 years, the Halloween series has thrilled and terrified audiences, from its low-budget origins to spawning a new era of slashers. The franchise remains a cultural touchstone around the world, often referred to as the Gone with the Wind of horror. From the first chilling notes of the iconic score to the final frame, join Joel Brown as we explore the iconic horror series, digging deep into the characters, the storylines, and the spine-chilling scares. Welcome to Talking Shape with Joel Brown, the ultimate podcast for Halloween franchise enthusiasts.
From a technical standpoint, Rob Draper is one of Australia's biggest exports in the film and television industry, with more than 40 years' experience from regional TV news to Hollywood feature films. And as we approach the 35th anniversary of Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome the director of photography for that film and fellow Aussie, Rob Draper. Hello and welcome.
Thanks, mate. Good to be here.
Was that a good wrap, or could I have added a few more things to that intro?
Oh, look, that was good. There could have been marching bands and big fanfare, but no, that was fine.
Independent podcast budget, unfortunately, there, Rob.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Now, just for our listeners, could you give us a background? And even myself here, I sometimes get confused what a director of photography or a cinema photographer is or does, because I always just thought it was the director behind the camera getting shots. But is that your job? Is that what you do?
Well, director of photography has become a little bit of a misnomer. People are sort of misusing it. And, you know, we're getting guys coming straight out of film school saying they're a director of photography, and they're really not. They're camera people.
Yep.
Some of the top DPs in Hollywood were good friends of mine when I first came over to the States. And one of them, Vilma Sigmund, who shot Close Encounters of the Third Kind and The Deer Hunter, said his theory was you're a cameraman for 10 years, you're a cinematographer for 10 years, and then you become a director of photography. And it's kind of true. I mean, a cameraman just gets some good shots. And a cinematographer gets some good shots and can plan everything out and plan a visual style and really sort of develop a look for a particular film. A director of photography can manage a crew. He can work with production. He can manage a budget. He can work with on tight schedules and work out how he's going to develop his visual style and get it all done within the constraints of time and money. And so there's a lot more. Director of photography is more of a business manager in a way than an artist. You know, the art in a lot of cases becomes secondary to being able to manage all the elements that you've got to manage, especially when you get onto a big show where you've got hundreds of people working for you. It's a management nightmare. So the DP is on top of having to develop a visual style and work with the director in fabricating the film, developing the look of the film, working out that you're getting all the shots that you need to cover it so the editor's got enough material to make it work. There's all that management side of it as well.
So it sounds like a lot that goes into it. So going back to the start for you, is it true your film career or your TV career at that time technically started when you wanted to film your wife riding horses? Is that correct?
You've done your research. When I left high school in Sydney, I went and studied dentistry at Sydney University. And I was a bit of a slacker, you know. I could pass everything easily, but I couldn't pass physics. And one of the things in dental and med and vet science at Sydney University was if you didn't pass everything, every subject, every year, you got the boot. And I failed physics the first year, and so they gave me a special pass to go and do first year again. So I repeated it again, but I spent most of my time at the movies. and watching musicals like Funny Girls, Sound of Music, South Pacific, Oklahoma, The Music Man, and not realizing that actually I should have been moving into the film industry instead of that. But, back then, a career in the film industry wasn't something that you even imagined you could have, so, yeah, and there were no film schools back then. So yeah. And so once I bailed out of dental school, I got a job in a Sydney hospital as a medical technologist. And then when my wife got sent down to Wagga to Riverina College to study to be a teacher, well, she was my girlfriend then, I thought, I'm not going to let her escape. I'm going down there too. So I went down and ended up, through a weird series of circumstances, getting a job in a pathology lab down there. And yeah, she was a top 3-day event writer and wanted me to film her. And I knew nothing about cameras. So went and ordered a Canon Scoopy. I remember it was $600, which back then, that was 1973. That was a lot of money. And the day I went to buy it, there was a guy from the local TV station said, "Oh, look, I've got a camera I'm selling. It's called a Bolex, and it's got 3 lenses, and it takes 100-foot rolls of 16mm film. And if you go out to the TV station, tell them you'll do part-time news, they'll give you free film and processing." And I thought, hey, I'll have a look at it. So he showed me the camera, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to look pretty damn slick walking around with this camera. And so I did it. And that was, it was like the bug bit me instantly. The more I got into it, the more I loved it.
So you're born in Sydney, and then you follow your then girlfriend to Wagga, where you're doing that medical gig, and obviously then start with the TV station there. So that was the local Wagga TV station.
Yeah, RVN2. And I should add that girlfriend that I followed to Wagga is still downstairs now preparing dinner, and been married now 51 years. So
right. That's an impressive record there. I think, what's the stat? They say that most marriages end 2 out of 3 end in divorce or something like that.
After 4 years.
No, congratulations. And so you're in Wagga there, because like I've actually never, funny enough, been to Wagga, but I've been told it's kind of like it's technically considered like a regional town, but it's a big regional town. Like I always think of Wagga, I always think of sports. So like a lot of big NRL, AFL footballers came out of Wagga. I imagine working for the local TV, that have you shot like a lot of sporting events? Is that what you kind of covered, or?
Well, to start off, we covered everything. Their news service was a 15-minute news service, and basically they had very little film in it. It was mainly, newsreaders sitting on camera, reading the news for 15 minutes before they crossed to the Channel 9 news from Sydney. And so when I went in, I said to them, I think we can get a lot more film in. And what they would do is they'd shoot film on the weekend, and then they'd run it on Monday. And then if there was something happened during the week, they might shoot a story on it, silent. And so I started churning this stuff out, and all of a sudden, the news service was like 1 minute of film, and then 2 minutes of film, and then 3 minutes of film, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and all voiceover. And they had a CP16, which was a sound on film camera, and they wouldn't let me use it. They said, no, that's only for commercials. And then one day, one weekend, they wanted me to cover a swimming carnival, and the general manager said, I want you to get this particular race because my granddaughter's in it. And so I thought, I'm going to take the CP16 and I'm going to record sound. Well, I recorded sound and we put it to air. And the general manager called up and said, how did you do that? And I said, I did it on that CP16 camera. He goes, you got to use that every time you go out from now on. So it was great. But that was a long way around. But we covered the stock sales. We covered, the local council. We did, fetes and art shows and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of sports, Aussie rules and rugby. And the RSL club down there was run by Arthur Summons, who was a I don't know if you know him, but he was a famous footballer back in the 60s and 70s. And so we did a lot of stuff down there with the RSL club and all that sort of stuff.
And because my background's radio, and sort of when you get your first sort of commercial gig, they send you sort of out regionally and that. But I always feel like I was born a few decades too late. If I was sort of cutting my teeth around this time in the 60s or 70s, I might have had a bit more of a longer go at it. As most, media sort of, they're looking to cut costs and streamline a lot of things. But with you, would you put it down to a lot, being in the right place at the right time? Because I imagine like 60s, 70s kind of technology, and it was kind of a bit of a golden age of Australian TV because it was just so new, and you kind of just showed a bit of interest in wanting to film your wife, but then that kind of led to going to a local TV station to get your foot in the door.
When I started there, I turned up on the first day and I knew nothing. I mean, I didn't know really anything about cameras. I mean, my knowledge of the Bolex camera was there was a little book that came with the camera and it told you how to make a movie. Wide shot, medium shot, close up, close up, close up, medium shot, wide shot. Get the audience in, get them out. And then it was all on 16 millimeter film, and I didn't understand that you had to have a light meter. I didn't even know what a light meter was. But inside the Kodak box, there was a guy with the sun overhead was f/16. Guy with the sun and a little bit of cloud was f/11. Heavy cloud was f/8. If it was raining, it was 5.6. And that's how I set my exposures until I read, and the more I did it, the more I started reading and understanding, okay, you actually have to have a light meter to do this stuff properly. But I had free reign. I mean, I was a one-man band running the news. And the first day I turned up, the station manager came in. He said, there's your film. If you want to shoot some film, that'd be great. You've got to write the intros to the news stories. You've got to chase up any stories that you want to film, get it in for processing by 3:00. And basically he said, we go to air at 6:15, good luck. And that was it. And I didn't have a clue. I mean, I was like, whoa. I bought a book called Television News Film Techniques. And it was by a guy, I think his name was Gerald Stone. And it was this book that was done by an NBC news guy that talked about the philosophy of news and the morality of news and the ethics and all that sort of stuff. But it went through and told you all the different things that you should do. You should talk to the local police and talk to the fire guys and get to know everyone, get to know the mayor, get to know all the councilmen. So that's what I did. I just went out and got to know everyone. And it got to the point where I was getting calls at 1, 2, 3:00 in the morning, hey, Rob, there's a accident out on the Hume Highway. Quick, get out to it. And so I'd go out in my pajamas, and film that thing. Yeah, but I had free reign. I mean, I really, it was the best film school you could ever had, because I did it for 4 years as a one-man band running the news, and we ended up winning awards after. In the second year, we started winning awards for the best regional news service, and the viewership went through the roof because I was going all over the region shooting stories at schools and swimming carnivals and stuff like that. So all the parents are logging into the news every night. The viewership just went through the roof, and they're going, oh, why is this happening? And it's like, because people like seeing themselves on TV,
Well, that's what I was going to say, because there's technically no, film or TV training. You basically it was all a hands-on approach from you. And how does that, like, that's good for like the local scene where, you'd, like you said, you're talking to the mayor, talking to the police station. How do you develop then to sort of commercials or to local film? How did that progression happen?
I started doing, there was a show called, I think, Talent Search or something like that, or Talent Quest, or I forget what it was actually called. And what they did is all the regional stations from all over Australia would get bands into the studio or singers or whatever, and film them, 3 cameras and that sort of stuff. But myself and this other guy, Martin Johnson, decided, instead of bringing them into the studio, let's shoot it out on location. Do it with the CP16 and shoot it, like a little movie. And what we didn't realize that what we were doing was music videos. I mean, that's essentially what we were doing. And the first year we did it, the band that we did won the national thing. They got into the national final and they won it, singing "Take It to the Limit." The band was called Mexico. I even remember that, and they were fantastic. But we did it like a music video, and no one had ever seen that before because, we didn't know what it was. We just figured we were making a little movie. But the progression was that we started doing those little music clips, and we did one with Mike McClellan and Marion Henderson and a few other people. And then we did a lot of regional commercials and, all small stuff where you're learning your craft, really. I mean, we're learning on the job. And it was fantastic because everything we did was a revelation to everyone at the station because they hadn't done it before. And so whatever we wanted to do, we could do. And then we sort of dreamt up this documentary series called Compass, where we went out and we did small, it's sort of like a magazine type thing where we did 15-minute stories on different things all around the region. And that did really well as well. And so it was like I was slowly building up, a repertoire, and I was doing a lot of reading and I was watching a lot of films and just studying all the time. I was basically doing it 24/7 because, and then I bought a Steenbeck editing system because I realized that to be a good cinematographer, you really had to understand editing. And so I started shooting all the news stories, and then I would bring all the footage home at night and I'd recut it, 2 or 3 different ways. So I'd take the footage with no voiceover and try to tell a different story by re-editing the story. So I was learning editing and pacing and all that sort of stuff, and it was awesome, And then I got some jobs on commercials in the Philippines, and I got some documentaries in different parts of the world, and I was still in Wagga, and I thought I might go to America, and there's this thing called the International Film and Television Workshops, where they had the top DPs from Hollywood doing 1-week workshops. And I went over to one just to sort of see where I fitted in, and that was what led to, I immediately went over and met all the top DPs basically in the world at those workshops, and they started inviting me back to assist at them, and then I was teaching them, and that just went on and on and on. And eventually Vilma Sigmund said, and Laszlo Kovacs, who shot Easy Rider, said, you should move to America. And so in 83, we made the move, and then struggled for about 6 years because no one had a bloody clue who Rob Draper was at that point.
And I believe it's about 1986, I think, when Crocodile Dundee comes out. Did that help the Australian influence at all with you being in America?
Well, the interesting thing was when I first went there, I was living in Manhattan, and no one even knew where Australia was. I mean, it was really wild because the 2 things that put Australia on the map were we won the America's Cup and Crocodile Dundee came out, and up until then, people in New York would say to me, "Oh, where are you? I can't believe how well you speak English." I'm from I'm Australia. I travel all over the world, so I've got to be able to communicate with people, and English is the best language. And they go, "Oh, what language do you speak in Australia?" And I said, "Well, we speak Aborigine most of the time." Yeah. And they said, "Oh, can you say something to us in Australian?" And I went, "Oh, yeah, okay." I said, Wagga Wagga, Grong Grong, Mangapla, Cookadinia, Binalong. And they go, "Oh, what's that mean?" I said, "It means give the Aborigines a fair go." And they go, "Oh, that's fantastic," you know. And all it is a string of town, the names of towns in Australia. So, but they thought it was awesome. Oh, wow, yeah. They didn't even know we spoke English.
Yeah.
So it was really bizarre. And I used to go to a place called Marvin Gardens on 83rd and Broadway and Upper West Side Manhattan, and I'd go in there for dinner, and I got to know all the wait staff and everything because I was a novelty. You know, no one ever met anyone from Australia, and I used to tell them stories, and I would tell them such bullshit stories, and they would go, "Oh my God!" And I'd tell them stories about 5-year-old kids in kindergarten learning how to defend themselves against sharks by punching them in the head, and oh, what happens when they punch the shark? Well, it stuns it and it rolls over. Then they pull it up on the beach and call the local fish and chip shop, and they come down and get it and use it for fish and chips. And all these New Yorkers are going, "Oh my God, I can't imagine my 5-year-old doing that." That's like, I can't imagine any 5-year-old doing it.
My dad always told me, and I think he got this from the Blues Brothers. Or it might have even been my granddad. He goes, "No, I didn't lie to you. I bullshitted to you." And my pa would always say, "Lies hurt people. Bullshit hurts no one."
Yeah.
So no,
I used to go to the Marvin Gardens, and I'd have 15, 20 people, and the more stories you told, the more people they'd come in, they'd be sitting with their plates on their laps, eating food, listening to my stories, and they're all bullshit. Yeah.
So how do we go from sort of starving a while in America there till Crocodile Dundee coming out, and then America realizing this little country called Australia? So how do you go from basically outback Australia into Manhattan for a few years there to Salt Lake City, Utah, where you're shooting Halloween 5: The Revenge of Michael Myers?
Well, I had I'd made quite a few friends in New York, and through the contacts that I'd made, I got onto Tales from the Dark Side, the TV series, and I think Dominic saw Tales from the Dark Side, but I vaguely recall that we were both represented by the same agent, but I can't really remember. But my agent was Robbie Lance, who was really a literary agent. He represented Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor. He brought Marlene Dietrich over from Germany, and he represented Lenny Bernstein and Michael Jackson, Paul McCartney. I mean, his list of clients was phenomenal. And you'd go in to see Robbie, and he would take you down to the Russian tea room for lunch at his special table. And, Woody Allen would be there and all these celebrities from New York. And you'd walk in and they go, "Who's that guy with Robbie Lance?" It's like, which was the idea. And, but it was through all the contacts that I'd made in New York that my agent got me onto Halloween 5.
And we're speaking off air. This is your first Hollywood movie, but you were kind of offered the gig at first and weren't too keen.
It wasn't that I wasn't too keen. I wanted to shoot it, but when our first son was born, we're living in Manhattan, and I got a job with Wesley Central Mission with Martin Johnson, who he and I had worked together for 4 years at RVN2. And Martin had this documentary series on the life of the Apostle Paul that was shooting all through Europe and the Middle East. And it was just an incredible opportunity to shoot a fantastic documentary series, and 36 half-hour episodes. And we were going to be on it for 6 months. So I was away when, and we were living in America. So I said to Sue, "Look, why don't you go to Australia, have been in Australia so that you're with family, and I'll go off and do this thing." Because at that time, we also needed the money. I mean, I wasn't getting a lot of work. So it was a case of I needed the money from that job, as well as it being a fantastic opportunity. And so she went to Australia. I went to shoot this film in a series in Europe and the Middle East, and I didn't see our son until he was 3 months old. So I promised her that wouldn't happen again. And of course, when Halloween 5 came up, she was due to have our second son. And I said to them, no, I can't do it. And actually, Mustafa Akkad called me, and he said, Dominic really wants you to shoot this film. You tell me what you need and I'll make it happen. And he said, and if your wife wants to come to Salt Lake City, I'll make sure she gets the best gynecologist, and we'll go to the best hospital. We'll put you up in a condo. And if you need one of your relatives here from Australia, we'll fly your mother over from Australia and put her up as well. And he did all that. I mean, it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. And it was like, well, I can't turn it down. So that's how it came about.
And was that your first conversation with Mustafa Akkad? I mean, he's kind of dubbed the Godfather of Halloween. Were you kind of like, I mean, you kind of knew who he was, but did you have much of a background on him in the film industry, or yeah, and like that phone, like that, just hearing that him say that, like just to get you over, like he'll like get a condo, make sure your wife's looked after. I mean, that's kind of got to make you feel pretty chuffed, right?
Oh yeah, no, it was fantastic. And because when when he told my agent that, my agent called me and she said, "You cannot turn this job down, so you've got to do it." But um, I loved Mustafa. I thought he was awesome. He was just he was for Mustafa. It was all about family, and he was still a businessman, and he was running a franchise, and he had to make money and all the rest of it. And there were a few times where we crossed swords because I was really learning the ropes. I mean, I it was my first big film, and there was a lot of stuff I didn't know, and so I was fumbling along a little bit as well. So, but he was fantastic. And when our son was born, I had the day off, and we had one of the greatest Steadicam operators of all time, Ted Churchill, was on it with me, and he was a good mate of mine, and so Ted took over for the day, and I went off and spent the night at the hospital, and Mustafa sent toys and for both our son, who was already there, and the new one, and flowers and chocolates and God knows what. It was it was incredible.
That's an amazing story. That's like
Yeah.
I love hearing those sort of feel good stories. Now you did mention Ted Churchill there, who you sort of said popularized the Steadicam. Obviously, Garrett Brown was the one who invented it. But I actually, because I was unaware who Ted Churchill was, I just did a bit of a quick search. I found this hilarious YouTube video of him going around set. I think it was a mid 1980s film. The name eludes me, but he was essentially just going around saying, "Oh, I'm going to try to find my new wife," and he was just basically going around to the different departments and just taking the piss, as we say in Australia, just having a bit of a laugh and that. And I seemed like he would be like a real funny person. Like he had that kind of sarcastic humor, so I could imagine that you and him got on very well.
Ted and I got on great. I mean, he was a really good friend, and we'd known each other for years. And it's a funny story with Halloween 5, because I called Ted up and I said to him, because Ted was working on big budget films, and I said to him, "Look, I'm doing this film Halloween 5 in Salt Lake City, and I want you to come out and do Steadicam on it. And there's going to be quite a lot of Steadicam because it's a French director, and he wants to do a lot of camera movement." And I said, "But also, you can be the camera operator on some of the shots as well if you want to do that." And he goes, "I don't want to do camera operator. I just do Steadicam." But he said, "I'll tell you what the deal is. I'll come out and do Steadicam for you if during prep we can go skiing every morning, because we're in Salt Lake City, and and actually my condo was right at the foot of the road that goes up to Alta and Snowbird. So every morning, Ted and I would go. We were supposed to be at prep, and we'd shoot up to Alta and Snowbird and go skiing. And I'd have a pager because you had no cell phones back then, and they would page me, thinking I was at home prepping, and he and I were up skiing. And we were hopeless skiers. I mean, we shouldn't have even been up there. It was too dangerous for us. And one time we went up in the gondola with the Swiss ski team, and there was a guy, Perman Zurbriggen, who was the downhill world champion. And he was in there. We're telling him about, yeah, we ski at the Snowbowl is where he goes, how big is it? It's huge. I can't remember how, it's like about 600 feet, something like that. And so we did that every day. And then the pager would go off and we'd have to ski down and we'd have our clothes with, we'd be changing in the car. Ted would get changed and then I'd stop and he'd drive and I'd get changed and we'd turn up ready for a scout or something.
And again, this is your first Hollywood film. You'd known obviously Ted for a little while to this point. Like, were you just thinking this is absolutely bizarre? Like, obviously we should have been doing prep, but because I was, you're with a veteran of the industry, you kind of just followed his lead, or?
No, not really. We sort of, we did goof around a bit with that, but we weren't really sort of slacking off. We were still doing the work.
Yeah.
But we were having a bit of fun as well, and most of the days they didn't want me in there until 11 or 12 o'clock anyway. And so it worked out perfectly. It was really good. But we, I still had to do the work, and the work that I didn't get to do in the morning, I had to stay up late at night doing because that was part of Ted's deal,
And what was Ted's thoughts on the production? Because obviously the from speaking with Dominic in interviews and such, there wasn't a second half or a third half of the script that was kind of getting written on the go. There was a fast track production because I think Mustafa made a deal with the theaters in America for this movie to be released in October of '89. This is your first Hollywood sort of feature. This is one of Dominique's, the director's, I think, first or second Hollywood American film. Did Ted kind of just like, was he kind of just used to that, like because he had been in the industry and worked on big budget films before? Was this just part of the deal, or did he ever sort of make comment being like, what's going on here? This is crazy.
No, well, you do that on every film. Every film you think is crazy for some reason or other. But no, Ted was he was a total pro, and there were things that drive you crazy, and there's stuff that doesn't. But it was always to him the most important thing was telling the story. And the same with me. We were there to tell a story, and regardless of what we were confronted with, that was the goal, and that was the way he approached it. There was no dismissing it as a low budget production or anything like that. He didn't. The budget didn't matter to him. What mattered to him was the shot, and so it was fantastic.
True, a true pro. And I'm just curious, once you sort of sign on that you're doing Halloween, I'm not sure how familiar you were with the franchise to that point, but I know a name that always comes up with cinema photography and DP is Dean Cundy from the original Halloween, that famous blue lighting at night that's just one of the famous shots in Halloween, and sort of would be stolen for a lot of other Hollywood films and horror films of that time. So taking on the job for Halloween 5, do you have enough connections to reach out to the likes of a Dean Cundy, or do you study the previous Halloween films? Was there much of a prep in that sense for you, or did you have a particular approach?
Well, I knew all the guys that had come before, so so reaching out to them wouldn't have been a problem. I didn't do that, and the reason was that Dominic wanted me to sort of have a good look at 1 through 4, and then forget about them, because he wanted Halloween 5 to have a totally different look. And his goal was to give it more of a European style, and get away from the traditional look of it. And that was one of the criticisms from a lot of the fans, was it didn't look like Halloween 5. It didn't look like a Halloween film. And that was intentional. That was, we went into it trying to steer it away from the first four, and give it a totally different feel. Part of that was shooting it all on wide angle lenses and stuff like that, which hadn't really been done before.
And we speak about the Swiss French director there, Dominique Othenin-Girard. Now, I feel like in like how history's kind of judged him, he's received a lot of criticism for for Halloween 5. I think a lot of it's probably unfounded. I'm not sure. I'd imagine you're kind of in the same boat there as well. Why do you think he's such a divisive character? And I say character within sort of the Halloween fan base. What do you have an opinion on that?
I don't know, and I've heard people criticize the way he did Halloween 5, and I think it was just different. And the interesting thing is, the number of interviews I've been doing in the last 2 years on Halloween 5 is phenomenal. And it seems that all of a sudden everyone's looking at Halloween 5 and going, wow, that film looks really good. And to be honest, I'm still really quite proud of what we did on that film, because it wasn't easy. And Dominic was really challenging, but I thought he was a fantastic filmmaker. I mean, the shots that he came up with and the way he did it and the way he told the story, I thought was terrific. And the criticism that he got, I really did think was unfounded. It was a little bit unfair, because he did do a really good job.
Now, I spoke to Dominic pretty earlier, and when setting up this interview with yourself, Rob, I sort of said, so Dominic told me an interesting story that you were fired and rehired within like a 24-hour period. Now, you and I have kind of spoken off air about this. So, I mean, in quick turn, I think Dominic kind of said that I think that he thought you and your team were making fun of him regarding certain shots. I think he was mentioning the opening shot with Jamie in the hospital, and how it sort of went close, and then there was a wide shot, and then sort of went through a different through the hallway, and it was quite a difficult shot. And me being Australian, I can understand someone being like, here's another student film shot. I think the term that Dominic used. Now, and when mentioning to you, you go, I can't recall being fired and rehired. What's first of all, I'll get your recollection, and then maybe we can talk about some theories that maybe led to this decision or non-decision. I don't know.
Yeah, I honestly don't recall it. And when you told me that Dominic had said that, I shot Dominic an email, and I said, "Did you actually fire me on Halloween 5?" And he wrote me back this long thing. "Oh yeah, I did. I fired you because you were doing blah blah blah, all this stuff, and you were making fun of me, and and then I came to your apartment at 10 o'clock at night, and your bags were packed, and I felt so sad that you were packing up to go home, and so I rehired you again." And but he said, "But I feel really bad." And he said, I wish that hadn't come up, because now I feel embarrassed about it." And I said, "I don't even remember it, because all I remember is that Dominic and I had a ball on that film. And I thought we got on great. But as you and I have said, I do remember, because I had an Australian or a New Zealand camera assistant who'd spent a lot of time living in Australia, Rex Nicholson, and we would be messing around and saying, "Oh my God, here we go, another bloody student film shot," But we weren't being critical, and we didn't stop to think that he was a French-speaking guy who didn't quite understand that we were just that was our sense of humor. And so, I guess he must have taken it personally if it actually happened, because I don't even remember it. I don't even remember being fired. My wife sort of vaguely remembers us having our bags packed, but I honestly don't recall, because after Halloween 5, I quite often, when I'd fly out to LA, I'd stay with Dominic in his apartment in Los Angeles. And we're still really good friends. I mean, like I said, as soon as you told me, I shot him an email and said, "Hang on, Dominic, what's this about?"
And I said I wasn't trying to ruffle feathers. This is just what Dominic had said, and this is just a theory that potentially first Hollywood film, you still, like you said, you were kind of still, playing catch up and learning the ropes a lot there. And you're just, when he would ask for a very demanding shot, you'd be like, oh God, a student film shot here. And again, that's just, you don't mean anything by that at all, but it's obviously cutting Dominic quite deep, and you're oblivious to this. And he talks to Mustafa being like, oh, Rob's making fun of me, and then Mustafa goes, all right, well, let's cut bait with him, and you're just completely oblivious to this potentially. Like, I just think that's hilarious.
Well, it was funny, and the funny thing was that Ted and I were giving him a little bit of stick too, but it was all in good fun. I mean, we weren't being nasty to him, and I guess Dominic said when I sent him the email, he said when you explained to me what you were doing, I understood that you weren't being disrespectful. You were sort of making light of the situation. And I said to him, part of it was we're under so much stress on that film, because we had to everyone had to do a good job. It was also a way of relieving the stress.
Yep.
But the funny thing is that opening shot, I love that opening shot. And when he was talking about it, it was like, holy crap, this shot is awesome. And we rehearsed it, and I had no idea how I was going to light it. I mean, it was really difficult to light and be able to go from a big wide shot from one room through a doorway into the other room and all the way into Danielle's face and not throw a shadow. That was the challenge. And so that's when, and I do remember saying to him, "Oh my God, here we go, another film school shot." I remember saying that on that. So if he did get pissed off and fire me, well, that's probably what would have done it. But I don't even remember that.
Now, I think we talk about tensions and back and forths. Reports are always, and I've spoken to Dominic about this, and he would always kind of have back and forths with Mustafa Akkad, or Mustafa would say things like, "Oh, Dominic, I need a character to free Michael from the jail," and that's how the Man in Black came about. The opening shot, there was supposed to be this character dubbed Dr. Death, this really thin young person. But then apparently Mustafa goes, "Oh, Dominic, I don't feel sympathy for this character." So they had to change it to an old man. Was there additional footage shot that was never used, or was there, I guess, sort of from a production standpoint, did it always seem like there was not butting heads, but just Mustafa sort of coming in with the pipe and being like, can we change this, or can we do that? Was anything like that sort of sticks out for you?
I don't recall shooting. I've had people say to me, "Oh, yeah, I heard you shot there's 3 different endings for the jail scene and all that," and it's like, that's news to me. I don't remember shooting 3 different endings for it. I remember shooting one, and it was a nightmare because we had to do it all in that one shot, going all the way through the jail and hide all the lights, and and shoot it all on a wide angle lens, all handheld. And I don't recall doing that 3 times at all. But there were times where when the Man in Black appeared, it was kind of everyone was looking at it going, "Who the hell is this guy?" And Mustafa would turn up with his pipe, and he'd be smoking. He'd go, "Don't worry about it. All will be revealed," And then when we did the thing of him getting off the bus, I remember, I forget who it was, said, "Oh, when he gets off the bus, he should kick a dog." I was like, what the hell? As who's got a dog? Oh, yeah, it's this guy over here's got. Did you mind if we kick it? Yeah, no problem. Put the dog in.
I think you've gone on record and said that the laundry shoot is one of your favorite scenes to shoot, and I think that's probably I'd say it's one of the main features in Halloween 5 is this laundry shoot. I mean, a lot of fans will take aim at the Myers house being a big mansion as opposed to that two-story house from the original, but without this mansion, you wouldn't have been able to do that laundry shoot scene. Can you sort of
Yeah.
talk us through the techniques in the lighting of the camera placement during the laundry shoot scene? Because everyone loves that scene.
Yeah. That scene was a real challenge because, the question is, how do you light it? And because theoretically inside a laundry chute there should be no light, and so Dominic and I spent a lot of time on that, and really the credit for that scene should go to, in a large part, to Brent Swift, the production designer, because Brent, Dominic and I worked out the shot list, what the shots were that we needed. And then we gave it to Brent, and Brent worked out what we needed in terms of set pieces to be able to shoot it. And he built something like, I think there are about 25 or 30 set pieces of that laundry chute that all ended up being cut together. Pieces with the side cut out that we could track on it, but vertical pieces where we could get a leg coming down. We shot part of it in the house. We shot part of it on a set. It was like, really we shot that laundry shoot sequence in one night. The whole sequence was shot in one night with all these set pieces, and we just put up the storyboards, and it was shots 1, 2, and 3 are in set piece 1, shot 3, 4, and 5 are in set piece 2. So, and we just went through and did it like a shopping list. But it was fantastic, and there were some shots that were left out of it. There was one shot where Danielle gets stabbed in the leg, and it was so gruesome it had to be left out.
Was most of the scenes with Danielle Harris, and it was that when it was horizontal, it was just like on a table, and you kind of had her on a skateboard with a bit of rope on each end where you could sort of drag her up, and that. So there was obviously no her literally falling down a chute vertically.
Yeah, no, the shot where you see the fall, that was the camera was mounted on a skateboard and literally horizontal, and then we just pulled it real back and we undercranked it so that we could speed it up later on, and then we sold it by going to the slow motion shot in the actual house and dropping a sandbag with fuller's earth and stuff so that it came down and went boom, and then exploded out. And that going from the real fast fall to the slow motion bang, it really was quite powerful.
Because they say that Don Shanks was he was really stabbing a real knife into it, and was Danielle Harris actually still in it when he was stabbing into it? Yeah,
we get asked that all the time, but
yeah.
no, when he was stabbing it, originally they wanted to do it with a knife that what do you call a retractable knife, and he didn't want to do that. He said, "No, let's use a real knife so we can see the marks going into it." And so he did it with the real knife. But no, Danielle was not anywhere. She wasn't anywhere near it when he was doing that.
And how was she to work with, Danielle Harris? I mean, she's I think 11 or 12 years old at this time. A child star like. And Dominic said that he would it would be a big game, like how he would sort of emotionally prep her or set her up. He would do a lot of talking to her like during her scenes. And that, how did you find her with those big critical scenes?
Oh, she was fantastic. I mean, she was. I couldn't believe the professionalism that she had at 12 years old. I mean, it was just phenomenal. And after the show, she became a really good friend, and she and her mum used to come over and visit us at the house when we're in New York, and she's still a good friend. I mean, when we're out in LA recently, we were sort of hanging out with her, and she's still hangs out with my eldest son, Ben. And actually the poster over here is actually Ben's poster, and it's signed by Danielle. It says, "Ben, can't wait to marry you." And because Ben was 5 years old, and he would sit beside Don Shanks every lunch hour and beat Don Shanks up because he was attacking Danielle all the time, you know.
Oh, that's cute. That's so cute. What about the Tower Farm barn? That's another set piece, and I imagine you mentioned Brendan Swift, who probably would have found that or helped construct that.
Which one are you talking about?
The Tower Farm barn, where the quote unquote love scene and then murder scene.
That's a real barn.
That's an issue trying to get some decent lighting there. That I imagine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't a set. That was a real barn. And yeah, that was boy, that was that was a night of shooting, that one, I tell you. Yeah, the entire show was difficult to light because Dominic wanted to use wide angle lenses in close, which I love because nothing makes an audience part of the scene more than having a wide angle lens in real close to the characters. And but the problem is when you're shooting a horror film, and what he would ask was 18 mil down low, back in the corner, seeing the entire room. Well, for a horror film, you can't front light, but the only way I could light it was to have lights back at the camera. So I had to come up with ways of lighting every shot so that it looked like, so that it was moody and dark and edgy and all that sort of stuff. And because I couldn't there was nowhere to hide lights. I couldn't hang lights because we're on practical locations. So, I had to either light through windows and stylize it like as moonlight, or I had to have lights coming from all sorts of weird and wonderful places. And if you notice in that scene where Dr. Loomis is wandering around the house and up the stairs and stuff, I said to him, "Look, I'm going to light this like Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now. And there's going to be little bits of light, and I'll show you where they are, but I need you to play those bits of light." And so I'd say to him, as you get to the top of the stairs, there'll be a piece of light, and you just got to slowly come into it and turn your head so that we see your eyes, and then you can move out of it. And then when you come over here, there'll be a light. And so, and I had lights hidden down on the floor, and, I'd say to Dominic, "Yeah, can we tilt up just a little bit so I don't see the light that's on the floor that's lighting him when he goes through." But the same thing in the barn. The barn was, I had to light it from outside, and then when we did the special effects with the rake going through the guy, of course all that was lit inside the barn. But that was all practical. That was all on a real farm.
You mentioned Donald Pleasence there, Dr. Samuel Loomis, sort of well into his career, sort of in the twilight of his career at this point. And I believe he believed that Halloween 5 was going to be his last stint with Halloween. He obviously did one more a few years later. But did you have much of a knowledge of Donald Pleasence at this time, who he was? Or, I mean, how was he perceived on set?
I knew who he was, and I'd seen a lot of his films, and he was a lovely guy. I mean, he was fantastic. He was always friendly, always professional, always wanted to make sure the angles were right. And if I asked him to do something for the light, he'd rehearse it, and then he'd check with me. Did I do it? And I go, if you could just turn a little bit more this way, and the next time, bam, but he was a pro, and he hit his marks. He knew where focus had to be. He was fantastic. And he was just a nice guy. You could sit down and have a chat with him.
When he tells Michael to go home, Dominique kind of said that was his sort of his Shakespearean scene where he, yells for him to go home. And I imagine shooting that, this is after the car crash, and he's just out in the open there. Was there any sort of stories or any Because Dominic said he really had to sort of push him to sort of get that performance. Did you sort of notice anything particular about that?
I really didn't, because a lot of the time when Dominic was talking with the actors about performance, he would do it in private,
Yeah,
and because he didn't want to do it in front of the crew, and a lot of the time it was because that was the only way he could do it, because we were so busy, lighting and getting the scene ready. So I wasn't privy to that, so I'm
yeah,
not too sure, but I do know that he was really concerned that would have the emotional content that he wanted. So when we were shooting that, he kept checking with me, how is it? Is it, does it work? Does it work? Does it work? Because, back then we didn't have 30-inch monitors on set.
yeah.
And, and I don't think we even had video tap.
And I think Danielle Harris, I think she sort of revealed in a past interview that he gave her his trailer because he was only on set for X amount of days to do
Yeah.
to do all his scenes, and she says, well, when giving him a hug, she wasn't sure what the odd smell was, but being older now, she knows that it was whiskey or bourbon. Um, did you have a drink with Donald by chance?
I might have. I can't remember. I don't recall. To be honest, when I'm shooting, I don't drink alcohol at all, because I and it's something that I've done right from the time I started in the business, that I've got to be sharp 100% of the time, and especially now I'm doing a lot of TV, and you got to be on your game, because if you're not on your game, you can't afford to turn up with a hangover or something like that. So I actually don't drink at all. However, let me qualify that. I did do a show with Michael Madsen, and who was in Reservoir Dogs, and Michael and I did share a few drinks every now and again.
Oh, that sounds like
Which,
it's a completely different story to itself, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, which I would regret the following day. But that was the one time I broke my rule. But I might have the occasional little tipple with Donald, but I don't really remember sitting down and getting stuck into it.
No, but do you think, like, I don't know, like, he's he's just a bourbon or whiskey drinker, but do you think that sort of goes to like this old school acting, like, especially it's like, he's a British actor, but like some would say that having alcohol would be unprofessional, but was that sort of part of the character or part of him getting in the zone, so to speak, for Dr. Loomis at this point?
Oh, it may well have been. I mean, I don't know. Looking back, I don't think I ever sort of thought that he was intoxicated in any way, but may have he may have done it to loosen him up,
Yeah.
or something. And I know there are a lot of actors who do that, but I don't know. I couldn't say one way or the other, because I wasn't really sort of close to where he was when he was offset. Once he was offset, I didn't know what he was up to. So he may well have done that, but I don't know.
Yeah. And what about some mishaps that were reported? Tamara Glenn, who played Samantha, her death being off screen because I think she got stuck on a nail in the barn.
She did?
Apparently, that's why I'm asking you potentially if you knew any more about it, but apparently not. What about with Don Shanks driving the car? Apparently, chasing Wendy Kaplan, who's playing Tina, she accidentally trips over her skirt or her cape, and I think Don Shanks stops just in time not to run her over. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. We the scene chasing, where he was chasing her in the car, was hilarious. And the only way we could shoot it was with Steadicam, because we were going to lay a dolly track, but it was too complicated. And the trees that he was driving through were in a field on the farm, and they had to go out and buy Christmas trees from this Christmas tree farm, and then they planted all the Christmas trees. So Don had to drive through them, but the ground had all been dug up. So he was getting wheel spin all the time. And that's why you see the rooster tails of dust coming up. But he would hit 3 trees and then the car would stop because they'd all be jammed up underneath. Then we'd have to get the tractor and tow the car back, pull the trees out, stand them up again. And so there was never one continuous run there. It was, stop, start, stop, start, stop, start. Because poor old Ted's running with the Steadicam, sideways to try and get the shots. And he kept coming back to me going, Drapes, this is hopeless. This is not going to work. And it's going, Ted, just do the shot, But, when you see it all cut together, it worked out pretty well. But that night was funny. And I mean, I remember Dominic and I were sort of panicking because we were losing so much time. But at the same time, it was hilarious because, the kids would run and the next thing the car would stop and everything there'd be steam coming out of it and when it blew up, it was like, thank God that's the end of that car.
I think Don, he thought the car was haunted because I believe the previous owner had died in the car, and I think he kind of felt some, I guess you could say, a vibe about the car. So, but I'm not sure what even happened to the car after the production. Do you know?
I don't know. I mean, when we did the blow up, the car was kind of smashed up, but I don't know what happened to the car. I don't know what happened to any of the stuff after that. I'd love to know where the laundry chute is.
If it's in storage somewhere or just on some scrap heap, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's probably in storage somewhere because I think Mustafa kept everything.
Yeah, right. So it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, a lot of that stuff would be. I mean, if you put it up on a Facebook Marketplace or eBay, I think some collector would definitely like to have it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Now,
I'd buy the laundry chute. The laundry chute was awesome.
Oh, well, maybe you might have to reach out to Trankis and be like, "Oh, how much is the laundry chute going for?"
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, in your opinion, what is Halloween 5's legacy to you?
The real legacy to me is first off, it's great to have been part of the Halloween franchise. And my wife and I were just talking before I came up here to get on this call, and I said, it's incredible. It's like 35 years ago, and the interesting thing is when I shot the film, I didn't want to show anyone because I didn't want to do horror films. My big thing was, I wouldn't mind shooting The Shining or The Exorcist or something like that, but I didn't want to do Halloween type films. But the funny thing is, that's almost all I've done. And, I've done tons of them. And I've just finished 4 seasons of Creepshow with Greg Nicotero, who actually did the effects on Halloween 5. So, so it's great to be part of that franchise. And it's sort of like a historical thing in a way, whether people like the film or not, it doesn't matter. You're still part of that family. But also it was it developed a great friendship with Dominique. We're still good friends, even if he fired me. We're still good friends after all these years, and also it was a massive learning experience for me because it showed me what I did know and what I didn't know, and what I needed to learn fast because and I'm sure it was the same with Dominique, because we were both under so much pressure and it was our first Hollywood film. So they're the 3 things that to me, would be the things that had the biggest impact on me.
And I said this to Dominic as well. I said that people have their opinions about the franchise and their favorites and ones they don't like, but these movies, they find their audience, and there's people that absolutely love Halloween 5, and they all somehow somewhere find their audiences. And especially over time, you mentioned it's been 35 years. You're kind of looking at a product right here. I was born in 1989, so I'm 35 this year, so it's kind of a funny coincidence there. But I think, yeah, this was one of the first ones that I kind of saw. I think my cousin Mark was, we all used to go to my nan's place because she had a pool and would rent movies. And this was actually one of the first ones I saw, and I was like, oh, what's this? And that kind of started me, going back and renting out all the older movies. So
Yeah.
fans have it. They have random entry points, whether it not necessarily be the first one or the second or fourth, fifth for my for me. So, but they find their audience. And I guess sort of after, once everything's wrapped with this, and do you go to the premiere for this? And is the phone ringing for future films or projects to work on after this?
After Halloween 5?
Yeah.
Um, uh, it's sort of it really didn't ring as a result of Halloween 5, but I think immediately after Halloween 5, I ended up doing Tales from the Dark Side, the movie with John Harrison, and then Tales from the Crypt with Dick Donner and Bob Zemeckis and all those guys, and so it did lead. I guess in a way it did lead to them, but I already knew John Harrison from Tales from the Dark Side because we'd worked together on the series. But it did definitely help with Tales from the Crypt, with getting that. But the phone wasn't ringing off the hook after Halloween 5, so I was hoping it would, but it didn't.
But it was a good launching pad though, right? Because you sort of mentioned those films that sort of came subsequent of that. And if you look at your body of work, you're highly regarded as one of the top sort of DPs and cinema photographers.
Yeah, no, it definitely did, and I got some fantastic reviews for Halloween 5, and like I said, I'm still quite proud of the lighting in that because when I think back of what I had to do to get some of those shots, and you look at them on the screen, it's like, how the hell did I do that? Because all the light had to come from the camera, and so it was every single setup was solving some weird problem that you would never dream you'd have to worry about. Because the thing with horror film is it's all edge lighting and backlighting, and no front lighting, no ring lights in horror film.
What do you sort of keep, like, still sort of keep in touch? You sort of mentioned Danielle Harris and some other cast members. Anyone that you sort of regularly keep in touch with? I mean, you mentioned that you could throw an email to Dominique and all that. Is it sort of, you mentioned Mustafa said it's like a family. Like, is it still kind of, you mentioned you're part of the Halloween family, so to speak?
Yeah, I've sort of reached out to Malik a few times, but haven't really heard much back from him because he was only a young kid when we're doing this. So it's sort of like I'm a bit of an unknown quantity to him, even though I shot Halloween 5 because he was so young
Mm.
when we were doing that. But really, the only person that I'm in contact with occasionally, not a lot, is Danielle, and Dominic and I, share emails and keep up to date. Maybe every 6 months or something like that, or every time I hear that I was fired.
Any stories that we might have missed that about your time on Halloween 5, or something that the fans might find interesting?
Well, I tell you, one thing that that a lot of people don't know is when we shot Don Shanks going down the creek, um, a lot of that was shot in a culvert on the side of a highway because it was too dangerous to do it in a creek, and there was a culvert where, and I can't remember how we got the water in it, but Don had to sort of wiggle his way down this culvert on the side of the road, where it was all full of rocks, and it was really just runoff from the ski areas. And So, we got him going into the creek, and then we got him going down this bumpy thing, in close up, so that it looked like he was still in the creek, but it was actually a culvert on the side of the highway. But yeah, a lot of people want to know, well, how did he survive that thing in the creek? It was freezing in that creek because I think we shot it in April. Or it was March or April, and yeah, it was freezing cold that night when we did that. And he was a trooper. I mean, he had a wetsuit on underneath, obviously, but yeah, Don was a good guy. He put up with some terrible stuff on that show.
What about Don's humor? Did Don have a bit of a dry sense of humor as well that
Very,
could relate to the Australian humor?
very dry. Yeah, Don and I got on great. He was he was man of few words, and but he was a really nice guy, really good guy, and he was great to hang out with, and he really tolerated my son beating him up every lunch hour because he was hurting Danielle.
Uh, that's so cute. Okay, that's a funny story.
Yeah.
Now, Rob, give us an insight. Now, I came across you with a new art website that you're currently doing. So you actually do a bit of like painting. Is that what it is?
At the moment I'm sort of doing all sorts of stuff. I did some digital work on some of the shots. I've got a huge collection of photographs that I've taken over the years all over the world. And so I started playing around with some digital paintbrushes and painting on stuff. And I showed a few, I wasn't showing, I was just doing it for a bit of fun. I showed a few people and they said, geez, I wouldn't mind buying one of them if you could get it printed. And then a few other people saw it and said, you should do something with that and maybe, start putting it in art shows and selling it. I was like, yeah, whatever. So, so anyway, more and more and more people who are actual, real artists kept saying, no, you should do it. Just do it. And so I did. And so I've launched this site. And at the moment I've got a ton of stuff that I'm doing downstairs because I've got about 15 or 20 new pieces that are variations on a theme. And what I did is I did all the stuff with digital brushes that I had custom made because I wanted to have brush strokes in the stuff. And in cinematography, my heroes are Rembrandt, Caravaggio, Constable Turner, Albert Bierstadt, Andrew Wyeth, and but mainly Turner. If I could shoot everything like a Turner painting, where it's just swirl of color and no real form, but just textures and color and there's more left up to your imagination to fill in the blanks. That's what I like. I'd love to be able to shoot like that because no one would watch the film if you shot it like that. So this is my opportunity to do that sort of stuff. And when I started doing it with the digital brushes was great, but it didn't allow me to go far enough. So now what I'm doing is I'm working with oil paints, and I'm going part of the way with, first off, it's a photograph. Then I'm dropping it into an application where I can use my digital brushes. Then I drop it into DaVinci Resolve, which is what we use for color grading all the movies, because I'm really familiar with that, much more familiar with that than Photoshop these days. And so then I can break the image apart and move it around and play around with it there. Then I take it out and print it. And then I'm working on top of the print with oil paints so that I can give it 3 dimensions, give it texture and shape and stuff. So that's what I'm working on at the moment.
What's your take on the AI art that's out there now? Are you kind of for it, or are you kind of feel that sort of discredits real artists? Where do you stand?
Well, I have rather a cynical view of the whole thing because I really believe that cinematographers are in a lot of jeopardy at the moment and largely because of AI. Because I've seen some AI scenes that are just astoundingly good, and uh, and AI is getting better and better and better. And is it good? Is it bad? It's different. It's just a different animal, and it's pushing things off in a different direction. But you still need cinematographers to work out visual style and stuff like that. But some of these guys who are doing the lighting on some of the AI stuff, and especially in the gaming now, I mean, the lighting in the gaming is just phenomenal. And incorporate that with, you get the guys who are capable of doing that lighting, add it into AI, and then put it onto virtual production, and all of a sudden you see DPs sort of slowly getting pushed aside, and producers are getting younger and younger. They're growing up in the world of small portable devices, and where one person can do everything. And a lot of the young producers don't see a need for DPs anymore. And I'm finding that with young producers that I'm coming across. And when I talk to other DPs about it, they go, you're a bloody old bastard, you're old fuddy duddy getting worried about all this stuff. It's a reality. I think that that there is, unless we're really careful, we could see it all slipping away, because you've got DITs coming in who think they control it. No, actually, I'll give you an example. I was talking to a producer, and he said, I find it hard to understand why I need to pay for a DP anymore, because he said the director works out how he's going to tell the story, the gaffer lights it, the DIT sets the exposure, the colorist does all the color grading. Why do we need that other person? And it's like, well, because they all do those jobs, but the guy who coordinates all that is the director of photography. And this young guy said, I don't see it. He said, I just don't see it. And it was like, boy, and that's a reality. I mean, we got there's a whole new young generation coming up who see things very different way to the way we've seen it in the past. So on one hand, AI, I think some of the stuff that's coming out of it is incredible, and I think it's only going to get better and better and better. But I think we've got to be really careful that everyone looks out for their jobs, because unless we transition into being somehow involved in it, we could end up sitting out in the cold. Luckily for me, I'm going to get to the end of my career, so I haven't got to worry about it too much more. But I think it's something that people should be looking at really seriously and saying, geez, how is this going to impact us in 5-10 years?
That's what I mean when I mentioned sort of radio, sort of, streamlining out of the cap city, going into regional stations, and AI kind of the equivalent for film and TV, right?
Yeah, well, what was it yesterday? I had a problem with a piece of equipment. So I got online. Oh no, I know what it was. My son's refrigerator packed it in. And so he was doing a job with Kevin Costner in LA. And I said, look, I'll call up the refrigeration company and see what I can find out. So I get on the phone, I'm having this long chat with a guy, and we're talking back and forth, and asked me where I was from. Oh, from Australia and blah blah. He said, oh yeah, I like your accent. And I'm going on and on and on and on, and asking him about the thing, and he tells me how to fill in a form for a rebate, and is it in warranty, and we talked for about half an hour, just like you and I talking here. At the end of it, I get this thing, and it said, would you give us an assessment of your conversation with our AI bot? And it was like, you got to be kidding. and it was like, so I called them back, and I said I wanted to talk to a real person. And I got on to someone, they said, yeah, that's our new AI bot who handles all the stuff. And I said, yeah, but they were talking to me about my accent. And she said, yeah. She said, and the woman said, it's scary. She said,
Yeah.
it's really scary. I was like, holy dooly.
I think I heard an interview where it said AI is at its most infancy now, but it's moving as fast as it's ever going to move. Like, so it's moving really fast, but it's still developing. So that is very scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it was incredible. Well, I read a story a while ago from the New York Times where the guy got on and the AI bot was trying to talk him into divorcing his wife. And it's actually, if you subscribe to the New York Times, you can download it and read it. It's a fascinating story, and he has the whole conversation transcribed, and it's incredible. And the AI bots, they're telling him that his wife's no good and she's probably cheating on him and all
Oh,
this sort of stuff. It's like, holy mackerel.
Speaking of AI, do you think AI had any part of your Instagram getting hacked a few months back?
Yeah, I don't know. It really wasn't my Instagram, it was Facebook.
Facebook.
And the funny thing is, I woke up at about 3 o'clock in the morning and I picked up my iPhone and I saw it was like, hang on, what's this? Did I just change my password on Facebook? And it's like, no, of course I didn't. And then it said, if it wasn't you, click here. If it was you, don't worry about it. Yeah. And so I clicked on the button, and as soon as I clicked on that button, I was done because that wasn't Facebook. It was the hackers.
Yeah.
And then I saw that, that was someone in Ho Chi Minh City and someone else doing this. And I was like, that was a nightmare. But I don't know. It might have been AI. I don't know. But they didn't get my Instagram account, but they got my Facebook account, and my Rob Draper art is still online, but I have no access to it. And as far as Facebook are concerned, I don't own it anymore. It's owned by whoever took it over. And I've said to them, but they're impersonating me. And they're like, well, they're not. They're Rob Draper art because it's there. And it's like, boy, this is messed up.
Yeah.
Facebook is the most messed up thing on the planet at the moment. Don't get me started on
I always say Zuckerberg, but I guess in that I was to say, if people want to check out your art, it's probably the best to go to the website. What's the website?
robdraperart.com.
Yep. And what about film and TV? What's anything in the pipeline that you could share?
There is there is a feature coming up, but I've had to sign an NDA, so I can't really talk about it. But it's with John Harrison, who John and I have been working together since Tales from the Dark Side back in 1983, and we're really good friends. And it's a film that you might be interested in doing an interview on when I can talk about it, because it's going to be it's going to make a lot of noise, and we're looking at shooting it in Pittsburgh, and we're just waiting right now for the final funding to come through, and they're talking to 4 potential lead actors in it, and but it's a remake of an older film, but it's not a remake as in shot for shot for shot. It's an evolution of this older film. But I can't, unfortunately I can't tell you too much about it, but that's the next job I'm going to be doing, and I'll be on that for about 4 months. So it's going to be quite a big project, and shooting in Pittsburgh.
Watch this space for that one. Looking forward to hearing about that. Rob Draper, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you so much for speaking with us. Any other things that we can plug for you before we wrap up?
No, just if everyone likes to, put $1 in an envelope and send it to me,
You and me
No.
both.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, this has been fantastic. I really enjoy doing it, and it's good fun talking about going back and reminiscing about the good old days on Halloween 5, because it's surprising the number of people who sort of who want to hear about what we did on it now.
I think the Halloween fan base is they're loyal and they're fanatical, and I'm biased. I think this is the horror franchise out of the big three, being Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and so on. But no, Rob, really appreciate your time, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to Talking Shape, the ultimate Halloween franchise podcast created by the fans. Make sure to stay up to date with the latest episodes by following Talking Shape on Twitter @talking_shape and liking us on Facebook. Feel free to give us a review on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. We appreciate your support. Until next time.
Go home! Go home!